They say fame makes you untouchable, but this moment shattered that illusion like glass hitting concrete. A leaked emotional breakdown, raw and unfiltered, showed Lil Durk hearing the words no superstar ever wants to hear. Not next year. Not soon. Not after one last miracle appeal. 2026. And the room went quiet in a way money can't fix. This wasn't a flex gone wrong or a viral stunt for sympathy. This was the sound of reality crashing through the myth. The clips spread like a secret nobody was supposed to see. Fans froze mid-scroll. Haters went silent for once, and even the jokes hesitated before landing. Watching a chart-topping rapper process years instead of months hits different. It felt less like celebrity news and more like a Netflix prison drama, leaking into real life. The kind that makes the Kardashians look like they're arguing over parking spots. Durk's face said everything before his mouth could. The confidence cracked. The armor slipped. And for a split second, the internet wasn't watching a rapper. It was watching a man realize time just became his enemy. Social media didn't just react. It leaned in, because moments like this don't happen often and they don't get erased. This wasn't just emotional, it was defining. And once the internet smells vulnerability mixed with high stakes, it doesn't let go. Buckle up, because this story doesn't soften as it unfolds. It cuts deeper. The moment the news hit, it didn't creep in quietly. It slammed into the timeline. Like a verdict nobody was ready to hear. Lil Durk, a name synonymous with resilience, survival, and street poetry, turned platinum, was suddenly being discussed in a tone that felt heavier than any chart position or award speech. The words "won't be free until 2026" landed like a gavel strike. Final and unforgiving, and the emotional reaction that followed turned this from a legal update into a cultural gut punch. What made this moment explode wasn't just the sentence itself, it was the way it arrived. Not wrapped in polished PR language, not softened by hopeful optimism. It surfaced like a leak, raw and unsettling, carrying the kind of energy that makes people feel like they're witnessing something they weren't meant to see. The internet didn't treat it like news, it treated it like a secret slipping through a crack in the system. Lil Durk has always marketed strength. Pain, yes, but controlled pain. Pain turned into bars, into albums, into sold-out arenas. Moment was different. This wasn't pain being packaged, it was pain being processed in real time. When the realization set in that 2026 wasn't a rumor or a scare tactic, but a concrete marker of time, something shifted. The bravado that fans are used to seeing took a back seat, and the humanity stepped forward, uninvited. The first reactions online were chaotic in the purest sense. Fans flooded comment sections with disbelief, typing like they were trying to rewrite reality through sheer volume. Critics tried to frame it as consequences catching up. Neutral observers just stared, stunned by how quickly a superstar narrative can pivot into something so sobering. This wasn't about music anymore. It was about time. And time is undefeated. Context made everything feel heavier. Lil Durk isn't just another rapper with legal troubles. He's a symbol of survival in a genre built on navigating systems designed to break you. His career has been a long arc of turning trauma into triumph, of outlasting expectations, of making it when the odds said he shouldn't. Hearing that arc might be paused. Until 2026 felt like watching a movie cut to black mid-scene. The emotional moment itself became the centerpiece. People dissected it, not out of cruelty, but out of shock. The quiet, the pause, the visible struggle to process what those years actually mean. Not months you can count on your fingers, but years that reshape careers, relationships, and relevance. In an industry that moves at the speed of virality, for years can feel like a lifetime sentence. Sarcasm crept into the conversation. Because that's how the internet protects itself from discomfort. People joked about time moving slower than streaming numbers. Others compared the moment to a plot twist in a prestige drama where the main character realizes the system isn't bluffing. But even the jokes carried a nervous edge. This wasn't funny chaos. This was uncomfortable reality bleeding through the screen. The background chatter grew louder as people started piecing together what led here. Old headlines resurfaced. Past controversies were dragged back into the light like unfinished business. Not because they explained everything, but because the internet loves retroactive clarity. When something big happens, everyone suddenly believes. The signs were obvious all along. Fans who followed Durk's journey felt this hit personally. This wasn't just a rapper they stream. It was someone whose music soundtracked real struggles, real losses, real survival stories. Seeing him break down over time instead of money struck a nerve. You can replace cars. You can rebuild brands. You can't get years back once the clock starts. Ticking. The first wave of commentary tried to frame hope. Appeals, technicalities, miracles, people clung to any possibility that could shrink that date. But hope online has a short shelf life. As the reality settled in, optimism gave way to acceptance, and acceptance gave way to anger. Not just at the system, but at the fragility of success itself. What made this especially jarring was how public it became. Lil Durk didn't control this narrative. He didn't drop it as a lyric or tease it in a documentary. It surfaced without permission, and that lack of control amplified the impact. In a world where celebrities curate every angle, seeing an unguarded moment feels almost invasive, and that discomfort kept people watching. The music industry reacted in its own quiet way. No grand statements, no loud defenses, just whispers. Conversations behind closed doors. Questions about timelines, contracts, and what happens when one of your biggest voices is potentially sidelined for years. The business of music doesn't pause for emotion. And that reality added another layer of cruelty to the moment. Public perception began to shift in real time. Some saw this as a tragic chapter in a larger story of systemic pressure. Others framed it as a cautionary tale about choices and consequences. The debate wasn't clean, because reality rarely is. Both narratives existed simultaneously, clashing. In comment sections like dueling philosophies, the emotional weight of the moment refused to fade. Even as news stories tried to trend, this one lingered. Clips were replayed, screenshots were reposted. The phrase "until 2026" became a haunting refrain, popping up in captions like a countdown nobody wanted to start. Time, once again, became the villain of the story. This wasn't just about Lil Durk's freedom. It was about what freedom represents in hip-hop culture. The ability to move, create, respond, evolve. Losing that, even temporarily, feels like losing oxygen in an industry that thrives on momentum. Fans weren't just worried about him, they were worried about what silence would replace his voice. As the first phase of reaction settled, one thing became clear. This moment wasn't going to be forgotten. It wasn't a headline you scroll past and shrugged off. It etched itself into the ongoing narrative of hip-hop's relationship with the justice system, fame, and the illusion of control. This was the opening chapter of something much heavier. The emotion wasn't performative, and the stakes weren't symbolic. Time had entered the chat, and time doesn't negotiate. And as the story continued to unfold, the internet leaned in closer. Not because it was entertaining, but because it was painfully real. And this was only the beginning. Once the initial shock wore off, the internet did what it always does when emotion meets fame and high stakes. It escalated. Quiet sympathy morphed into loud speculation. and loud speculation mutated into a full-blown cultural debate that refused to stay in one lane. This wasn't just about Lil Durk anymore. It was about what his moment represented, and representation is where the internet turns everything into a battleground. Celebrity reactions began surfacing in fragments. Not full statements, not press releases, just cryptic posts, emojis, and carefully chosen silence. Rappers who usually have something to say about everything suddenly posted unrelated content like workout clips and studio selfies. And the timing felt deliberate. In online culture, silence is never neutral. It's either respect, fear, or strategy. And fans spent hours arguing which one it was. Some artists showed subtle support, throwing up prayer hands or referencing time and patience, without ever naming names. Others leaned into tough love rhetoric, reminding audiences that choices come with consequences. The split was immediate and brutal. Supporters framed Durk's situation as another example of the system chewing up talent and spitting it back out. Critics framed it as a predictable outcome in a genre that flirts too close with danger. Both sides talked past each other, and the algorithm loved every second of it. Memes tried to enter the chat, because memes always try. Some compared the moment to a season finale cliffhanger where the main character realizes the escape plan failed. Others joked darkly about time moving slower than release schedules. But even the memes felt heavier than usual, like people were laughing through clenched teeth. This wasn't carefree clowning. This was nervous humor. The kind people use when reality gets uncomfortable. Pop culture comparisons exploded as viewers tried to process the gravity. People likened the situation to iconic scenes from prison dramas, where the sentence finally sinks in and the tough guy facade collapses. Others compared it to fallen sports stars, realizing they won't make it back for one last season. The comparisons weren't random. They were attempts to contextualize something that felt too big and too real to absorb on its own. Public outrage took shape in waves. One wave focused on empathy, flooding timelines with reminders that no amount of fame makes time easy to swallow. Another wave pushed accountability, arguing that emotional moments don't erase responsibility. And then there was the third wave, the loudest one, questioning why the system always seems to deliver the harshest chapters to artists who come from the same backgrounds. That wave didn't just rage, it demanded conversation. Reaction channels went into overdrive. Thumbnails screamed words like heartbreaking. This changes everything. And 2026, because emotion sells just as well as scandal. Commentators spoke with dramatic certainty, dissecting body language, tone, and facial expressions, like they were analyzing a championship fight in slow motion. Every pause became symbolic. Every breath became meaningful. Accuracy took a back seat to intensity. Old lyrics resurfaced, quoted like prophecy. Lines about pain, survival, and time suddenly felt eerily on the nose, as if Durk had been narrating his own future all along. Fans shared verses with captions like he warned us. And this hits different now. The internet loves retroactive meaning, and this moment gave it plenty to work with. The narrative began to stretch beyond music into identity. Lil Durk wasn't just a rapper in this story. He was a case study, a symbol, a mirror. People projected their own fears onto him. Fears about wasted potential, about being trapped by circumstances, about time slipping away while the world keeps moving. That's why the story stuck. It wasn't just about him, it was about everyone watching. Sarcasm sharpened as the conversation grew. Some commentators mocked the industry's sudden concern, pointing out how quick it is to profit from pain and how slow it is to protect its own. Others sarcastically noted how streaming numbers don't pause for prison calendars, how the machine keeps running even when the artists can't. The humor wasn't light. It was cutting, and it kept the pressure on. The outrage also exposed fractures within fan communities. Some fans argued passionately that this moment should spark reform conversations. Others accused those fans of deflecting from personal responsibility. Comment sections turned into philosophical debates about free will, environment, and consequence, with nobody changing their mind, but everyone raising their voice. The internet thrives on unresolved arguments, and this one felt endless. As days passed, anticipation replaced shock. People stopped asking, "Did this really happen?" and started asking, "What comes next? Will there be music recorded behind the scenes? Will statements come out? Will this moment redefine his legacy or become a footnote?" The waiting became part of the drama, stretching the tension like a rubber band pulled too tight. Media coverage intensified, but clarity didn't. Headlines grew more dramatic, summaries grew thinner, and speculation grew bolder. Each outlet tried to add a new angle to keep the story alive, and in doing so, the emotional core sometimes got lost. But even that loss became part of the narrative, commentary on how quickly genuine emotion gets repackaged for clicks. What made this phase especially volatile was how personal it felt. People weren't just reacting to a legal update, they were reacting to vulnerability. Seeing a public figure confront years instead of months stripped away the illusion that success insulates you from consequence. That realization hits harder than any scandal, because it's not entertaining, it's sobering. The internet began framing the moment as a turning point, not just for Durk, but for the culture around him. Conversations about longevity, accountability, and survival took center stage. Some argued this would deepen his artistry, turning absence into myth. Others worried silence would erase momentum in an industry that forgets fast. Both arguments carried weight, and that tension kept the story alive. As outrage cooled into contemplation, one thing became clear: this moment had legs. It wasn't going to disappear with the next viral clip. It had embedded itself into the ongoing conversation about hip-hop, justice, and time. And once a story embeds itself that deeply, it doesn't fade. It evolves. The internet leaned back, not satisfied, but waiting. Waiting for consequences, clarifications, or the next emotional beat. Because stories like this don't end cleanly. They stretch, they twist, and they keep pulling people in long after the initial shock wears off. And the heaviest part was yet to come. By the time the conversation shifted into its aftermath phase, the energy had changed from loud reaction to heavy reflection. This is the stage where stories stop trending and start lingering, where the shock fades but the implications sink their teeth in. Lil Durk's emotional moment wasn't just another viral clip anymore. It became a reference point, a timestamp people would keep circling back to when talking about fame, freedom, and the cost of surviving in public. The immediate fallout wasn't dramatic in the way social media usually prefers. There were no explosive statements or chaotic back and forths. Instead, there was distance, quiet, space. And that silence felt louder than any rant. Fans noticed fewer appearances, fewer updates, fewer breadcrumbs. When someone whose career thrives on constant presence suddenly feels far away, people don't assume peace, they assume gravity. Public perception hardened into something complicated. Sympathy remained, but it mixed with skepticism and fear. Supporters worried about what years away from the spotlight could mean in an industry that forgets fast. Critics framed the moment as inevitable. It's a tragic but predictable collision between lifestyle, environment, and consequence. Neutral observers simply acknowledged the truth nobody likes to say out loud. Time doesn't care who you are. The music itself took on a new weight. Songs that once sounded like victory laps were reinterpreted as survival diaries. Lyrics about loss, loyalty, and pressure hit harder when filtered through the reality of a 2026 timeline. Fans replayed old tracks and heard them differently, like reading a letter after knowing how the story ends. That kind of reinterpretation cements legacy. But it also freezes it in place. Relationships around Durk felt strained in the public eye, even when no drama was visible. When moments like this happen, people start counting who shows up and who stays quiet. Every absence gets noticed. Every delayed message gets analyzed. The internet treats proximity like proof and proof like judgment. Whether that's fair doesn't matter because perception has already chosen its lane. The industry's response was subtle but telling. Conversations shifted behind closed doors. Timelines were adjusted. Long-term plans were quietly reconsidered. The business of music doesn't stop for emotion, and that cold reality became part of the story. It wasn't just about Lil Durk anymore. It was about how the machine keeps running even when one of its loudest voices goes silent. This moment also reshaped how people talked about resilience. For years, Durk's narrative has been about endurance, about pushing through pain and turning survival into success. Seeing him confront time in such a raw way challenged that mythology. It reminded audiences that resilience doesn't mean immunity, and strength doesn't erase consequence. That realization hit harder than any headline. The conversation around justice grew louder, but more fragmented. Some used the moment to call out systemic patterns, arguing that stories like this repeat too often to be coincidence. Others pushed back, insisting accountability matters regardless of background or talent. The debate wasn't new, but this moment gave it fresh fuel. And fuel keeps arguments alive long after the original spark. Fans began imagining the future in two competing visions. One saw this as the making of a legend, absence turning into mystique, silence sharpening impact. The other saw erosion, momentum slipping away while the culture moves on. Both visions carried truth, and that uncertainty made the story heavier. Nobody could confidently say which path would win. The emotional clip continued to resurface, not as breaking news, but as context. It appeared in montages, retrospectives, and think pieces dissecting hip-hop's relationship with time and consequence. Each reuse reinforced its importance. This wasn't a fleeting moment. It was becoming archival, the kind of clip that gets referenced years later as a turning point. What lingered most was the vulnerability. In a genre built on bravado, seeing raw emotion without armor cuts deep. It humanizes, but it also exposes. Audiences felt closer, yet more helpless. You can stream songs, you can post support, you can argue online, but you can't fast-forward time for someone else. That helplessness is uncomfortable and uncomfortable. Stories stick. As weeks passed, attention inevitably drifted. New controversies popped up, new names trended, but this one didn't disappear. It settled, became part of the background conversation, the kind that resurfaces whenever similar stories break. Remember Durk, people would say, using his moment as shorthand for a larger truth. The long-term impact on his reputation remained unresolved. Some believed this chapter would deepen respect, framing him as a survivor confronting reality head-on. Others worried it would overshadow future work, trapping his narrative in a moment of loss rather than growth. Legacy isn't decided in real time, it's shaped slowly, and this chapter will weigh heavily on how the story is told later. What's undeniable is that the illusion cracked. The idea that success insulates you from the hardest consequences lost credibility. Fans watching this realize that money, fame, and influence don't negotiate with calendars. Years still count. The same. That realization sobered even the loudest timelines. This wasn't an ending. It was a pause filled with uncertainty. A deep inhale before whatever comes next. The story didn't resolve, it transformed, shifting from spectacle to reflection. And reflection is harder to shake than outrage. The curiosity now isn't about drama, it's about endurance. About what happens to art, identity, and relevance when time stretches longer than patience. About whether this moment becomes a footnote or a foundation for what follows. The internet will keep watching. Not with the same volume, but with the same memory. Because once a moment forces people to confront time instead of clout. It leaves a mark, and marks like that don't fade. Now this is where the story stops being just his and where it starts being everyone's. Was this moment a heartbreaking reminder that time doesn't care about fame? Or was it the turning point that reshapes Lil Durk's legacy forever? Drop your honest take in the comments, because this conversation cuts deeper than charts, sales, or streaming numbers. No emojis, no shortcuts, just real opinions. If this breakdown hit you in the chest, rewind it in your head, or made you sit there quietly for a second, smash that like button like it owes you money, and tried to dodge accountability. Likes push this conversation forward, and trust us, this one deserves to be heard louder than recycled headlines and lazy takes. Subscribe if you want storytelling that doesn't glamorize pain, but doesn't run from it either. Moments like this don't happen every day, but when they do, the rap truth is already locked in. No sugarcoating, no fake sympathy. Just raw breakdowns of the moments that define careers, culture, and consequences. If it's emotional, controversial, or makes the internet uncomfortable, you already know where it's getting dissected. Turn on notifications. Because the next update, lyric, or courtroom headline can flip this narrative overnight. One song, one statement, one decision could change everything. And you don't want to catch it late, pretending you saw it coming. In a world where clout fades, time doesn't, and reality always gets the final verse. Remember this moment. Fame pauses. Calendars done. This is the rap truth, where emotions aren't edited. Legacies are questioned, and the truth hits harder than any hook.